All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome once more. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. Because we care for one another's safety, our congregation is gathering online during this long season of coronavirus pandemic. Nevertheless, through the gifts of technology, we continue to celebrate community and connections as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love.
Arise, O souls,
Always, it is easier to pay homage to the prophets than to heed the direction of their vision. It is easier to blindly venerate the saints than to practice the human quality of their sainthood. It is easier to glorify the heroes of the race than to give weight and faithfulness to their examples. To worship the wise is much easier than to profit by their wisdom. Great leaders are best honored not by adulation, but by sharing their insights and values. Grandchildren of those who stoned the prophet sometimes gather up the stones to build the prophet's monument. Always, it is easier to pay homage to the prophets than to heed the direction of their vision. This morning, I invite us to remember the direction of Dr. King's vision and how he pointed us toward a dream of beloved community and revolutionary love, in spite of the hatred and violence that he and so many others experienced. I invite us to remember how far many of us have come during the 50 years and more since his death, in understanding the subtle and devious ways that white supremacy perpetuates itself in our culture and in our own minds and hearts, even among people of color. I encourage us to think of the progress that has been made since the days of whites-only drinking fountains and public lynchings, and at the same time, ponder how much remains to be done to bring to pass the beloved community of justice, equality, and human kinship that he taught us to believe that America could one day be. These are holy memories, and the work of liberation is now and has always been sacred. I kindle this chalice flame in celebration of that work and our share in it, both the changes that have been wrought by the labor and faith of those who came before us, and the tasks that are now in our hands to carry on and to complete. This morning, we have also in our thoughts our Jewish friends and neighbors, including our partners at Congregation Kol Ami, all of whom must once again come to terms with the violent invasion of their worshiping community in Colleyville, Texas. It is good that the hostages are safe now, but it is sad for all of us that our religious identities can constitute a threat and a motivation for hate. May we learn to pursue justice, and may the days of peace come soon, here in this world, even in our own lifetimes. May this light remind us to honor our prophets, not by adulation, but by sharing their wisdom and values, by following their example, and by doing our part to fulfill their yet unfinished dreams.
Now let's join together in speaking once again our covenant promises to this community. Together we affirm,
Goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rise march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Last December, the world lost two prominent advocates for the vision of a post-colonial, racially equitable society. African Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who worked with Nelson Mandela to end the white apartheid regime in South Africa, and the American Black feminist scholar, activist, and author Bell Hooks. There were very different but equally irrepressible personalities, were part of what made them each memorable. So we share with you this morning two brief video clips of Archbishop Tutu explaining the concept of Ubuntu, and of Bell Hooks in conversation with author and activist Cornel West.
Ubuntu is an approach to life that is very difficult to describe in English words. It speaks to the very essence of being human, saying, my humanity is caught up, is inextricably bound up in yours. We belong in a bundle of life. And so we say in our part of the world, a person is a person through other persons. It says not, I think, therefore I am. It says rather, I am human because I belong, I participate, I share. And harmony, friendliness, community are great goods. Social harmony is for us the summum bonum, the greatest good. That you and I are made for interdependence. You and I are made for complementarity. You have gifts that I don't have. I have gifts that you don't have. And you might almost see God rubbing God's hands in glee Voila. That is exactly why I created you. That you should know your need for the other. Africa is the birthplace of Ubuntu, the ancient spirituality of humanity's oneness with our Creator, the other, and nature. Together with humanity's team, I dream of a new world and a new humanity, a humanity that expresses Ubuntu. Umtu, ngumtu, gabantu. I am because we are. We are all one. I encourage you to remember the magic of who you are. Live to your highest potential and see the potential in others. To celebrate the wonder of our diversity, and most importantly, to go and be who you are. This is our common legacy.
We thought it would be crucial to begin with this quote from Brother Martin Luther King Jr. This is from his speech, "Where do we go from here?" Martin says, "I have decided to love." That's a major decision. If you are seeking the highest good, I think you can find it through love. And the beautiful thing is that we are moving wrong when we do not do it, because John was right, God is love. He who hates, and this is Martin saying he who hates does not know God, but he who has love has the key that unlocks the door to the meaning of ultimate reality. That's from Martin.
I have decided to love. If you are seeking the highest good, I think you can find it through love. And the beautiful thing is that we're moving wrong when we don't do it, because John was right. God is love. She who hates does not know God, but she who has love has the key that unlocks the door to the meaning of ultimate reality.
And for me, love is not a soupy-surpy kind of thing. And I think this is crucial, because in a market culture like our own, in a hotel civilization like America, love is either reduced to some kind of stimulatory lust or some kind of sentimental passion. What love is about struggle. What Sister Bell was talking about when she acknowledged the degree to which we have various kinds of disagreements, she was saying, Cornell, or Brother Cornell, we need to escalate the level of our struggle together. And one of the reasons why it's so difficult to talk about love in America is because we live in such a sentimental and melodramatic culture, which is to say we like to stimulate feelings without any serious action or commitment. I love my mother. I'm willing to take a bullet for her. That's serious. Now, whether I'm willing to take a bullet for each one of you all is another question. But I'm in process.
And this is one of the spaces where we don't always agree. I'm much more interested in the symbolic willingness to die to things of the past symbolically and be born again. That is to say, I think that when we talk about love in connection to racism and white supremacy, essentially we're asking that all of us in this nation be willing to die to values, attitudes, beliefs that many of us have held on for years, and be born again in another way of thinking about the world, in another way of thinking about people. Should we pause for a minute, brother?
Oh, yeah, she wanted to lift up the mic.
Okay.
I want to lift up the mic. It's still hard to hear.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm not interested in having this afternoon be subordinated to radio. I'm not saying that I'm not excited about the radio. I'm saying that I want us to have our time and the radio to have its time too. I think even what we saw here exemplified in our lived practice, that if you want to change the structure of something or intervene on it, you have to be willing to have that little moment of chaos. You cannot have the smooth running system. And I think one of our resistances to change is we want the smooth running system, whether we're talking about our personal lives and love, the community of our domestic households, and yet we're smart enough as a nation to know you don't get a smooth running system in your personal household that you really have to process, as we had to process just a few minutes ago. And the reason I bring that up is often we respond negatively to the moment of process. You know, even myself, you know, one of the things when I said to Cornell is, you know, I don't agree with some of the things you're saying lately. But I didn't really want to greet him after not seeing him for such a while with having to admit that I don't agree. Now think about that. We're two people who forged so much in dialogue, and I can still feel afraid to say to him, I don't agree with you. And I think that so much of our shying away from anti-racist struggle is the fear that we have that when we come together in our differences and there is disagreement, we will have conflict and everything will fall apart. So many people feel it's better not to come together. It's better to stay with people that are just like yourself, where you can feel safe, where the smooth running can happen without any moment of chaos or conflict. But in the true spirit of both spiritual and political revolution, in the best sense, we cannot begin to build beloved community without embracing the moments of tension and conflict as part of the struggle, as part of what we're seeking.
Hi, I'm Kathy Weil, a member of this congregation. I'm also part of All Souls' new advocacy program. I'm your advocate for racial and ethnic identity. It was probably at an All Souls workshop years ago that I first became aware of white privilege, systemic racism, implicit bias, although I'm not sure we called it that. Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism had asked that the white people in UU congregations start doing their own work on racism. I'm guessing some of you were there. As a white person who grew up and lives in a white-centered society, I can't know what it's like to be a Black person, Indigenous person, or person of color. But what I can do is educate myself and take action. What we can do as a congregation is educate ourselves and take action. If you are Black, Indigenous, or person of color, I invite and have stories to share. I invite you to contact me at klweil@gmail.com. If you are a white person who, like me, is uncomfortable and afraid to make mistakes and don't want to live in a racist society, know that we probably will make mistakes, but together we can move toward anti-racism. How do we do that? What can our congregation do? We can learn about our country's real history instead of white supremacy version we were taught in school. We can read books and listen to podcasts by Black authors. We can learn about Black joy through music, TV shows, and movies by Black artists. We can get food from Black-owned restaurants and buy products from Black businesses. And we can donate to Black-led organizations like GIFT, the recipient of today's special offering. GIFT, or Generating Income for Tomorrow, provides grants and support to Black-owned businesses in Kansas City with a special interest in businesses that operate in low-income areas. GIFT was founded in 2020. They strive to be an actionable step after all the protests have ended and to educate and empower others to take action. They work to ensure that we close the racial wealth gap, reduce poverty-related crime, and reverse the effects of systemic racism in our city. The core of their mission is focused on urban job creation through the expansion of Black-owned businesses. I encourage you to go to their website, Kansas City Gift, That's gift.org to learn more. And I encourage you to give generously. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Si famandla così, kung sabi si famandla così, si awadinga si famandla così, kung sabi si famandla così, si awadinga. Oh God, give us power to rip down prisons. Oh God, give us power to lift the people. Oh God, give us courage to withstand hatred. Oh God, give us courage to not be bitter. Oh God, give us power and make us fearless. Oh God, give us power because we need it. Si famandla così, kung si famandla così, si awadinga si famandla così, kung sabi si famandla così, si awandinga.
Say together the words of dedication for our offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
From bell hooks, love as a practice of freedom. The civil rights movement transformed society in the United States because it was fundamentally rooted in a love ethic. No leader has emphasized this ethic more than Martin Luther King Jr. He had the prophetic insight to recognize that a revolution built on any other foundation would fail. Again and again, King testified that he had decided to love because he believed deeply that if we are seeking the highest good, we find it through love, because this is the key that unlocks the door to the meaning of ultimate reality. And the point of being in touch with a transcendent reality is that we struggle for justice, all the while realizing that we are always more than our race, class, or sex. When I look back at the civil rights movement, which was in many ways limited because it was a reformist effort, I see that it had the power to move masses of people to act in the interest of racial justice, and because it was profoundly rooted in a love ethic.
Reading from Kim Macon on Martin Luther King's Revolutionary Love. Whether responding to a bomb, a punch, or an arrest, King's actions reinforced community, the beloved community. As the King Center explains, the beloved community is more than an ideal. It's a tangible and realistic goal, achievable through a culture of nonviolence. At the basis of this community is a revolutionary love, a biblical love known as agape. King describes it in Stride Toward Freedom. Agape is not a weak, passive love. It is love in action. Agape is love seeking to preserve and create community. It is insistence on community, even when one seeks to break it. Agape is a willingness to sacrifice in the interest of mutuality. Agape is a willingness to go to any length to restore community. It's a willingness to forgive, not 7 times, but 70 times 7 to restore community. We often praise King for his ideology of nonviolence, but we should also praise him for his spirit of resistance. He and the people around him were targets in every imaginable way. Yet that did not stop King's ambitions for a better way and a better world. His plan grew out of a revolutionary love. Principles and steps were established. Out of this great love, King came to realize the need not only for racial justice, but economic justice. In the end, he would strike out against the triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism. King's revolutionary love shared a moment that would change his world and holds answers for us today.
From Archbishop Desmond Tutu. We are made for goodness. We are made for love. We are made for friendliness. We are made for togetherness. We are made for all the beautiful things that you and I know. We are made to tell the world that there are no outsiders. All are welcome. Black, white, red, yellow, rich, poor, educated, not educated, male, female, gay, straight, all. We all belong to this family, this human family, God's family.
The joy is irrepressible. The love is palpable. The underlying foundation of spiritual maturity and shared values is evident. If you ever want to see the concept of beloved community in action, just summon up a YouTube video of Tenzin Gyatso, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, visiting with his friend, South African Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and watch a few minutes. The Archbishop's daughter says that they are like 8-year-olds, laughing, teasing, poking each other, clearly delighted to be together. Two of the world's most revered spiritual leaders and teachers stand on no ceremony with one another. Their mutual respect is so profound that it needs no formal gesture. They come out of widely different cultural backgrounds and religious traditions. Neither speaks the other's first language. Yet their experiences of suffering, loss, oppression, and the challenges of leading faith communities through dangerous historical eras have made them men of towering faith and deep humility, have tempered their spiritual maturity to a point of immediate mutual recognition. Each expands in the presence of the other's authentic humanity. It is an unlikely friendship across the barriers of race, nationality, and ecclesiastical hierarchy. Beloved community is like that. It is what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose birth we celebrate this weekend, once told us that he dreamed of. Desmond Tutu went home to his God 3 weeks ago, delivered by his own request in the plainest pine box available. We are losing the great leaders of the 20th century struggle for liberation and equality. Those who, unlike Martin, survived to die of things like cancer at the age of 90. People such as Americans John Lewis, Rosa Parks, Elijah Cummings, C.T. Vivian, and Coretta Scott King, as well as Tutu's elder collaborator in dismantling apartheid in South Africa, Nelson Mandela. These activists came of age amid racism in forms more overt, brutal, and legally sanctioned than the systemic issues that continue to ravage our societies today. They experienced the full weight of Jim Crow in the American South and colonialist apartheid in Africa. Their physical courage and stamina alone was remarkable. They endured beatings and bombings, harsh imprisonment, attack dogs and fire hoses, as well as economic and legal inequalities and denial of basic education and voting rights. Dr. King, Desmond Tutu found both hope and a prophetic vision of justice in his Christian faith, as well as a platform for leadership within the Black community and a status of some dignity in white society. His rise through the ranks of the Anglican Church hierarchy demanded that he leave his home for several lengthy periods of work and study in England. And his effort to bring pressure on the colonial legacy government to end its white minority rule in South Africa involved extensive international travel. He was the first Black person to serve several prominent Anglican congregations in major cities in his nation, or to be named Bishop of Johannesburg or Archbishop of Cape Town. After the official end of the apartheid regime in 1994, Tutu was tapped by the newly elected President Mandela to organize and implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This was the government body that would hear testimony from victims of human rights violations and determine whether to grant amnesty or to prosecute accused perpetrators. Bearing witness to thousands of these stories over a period of more than 2 years was emotionally wrenching work, which more than once left the Archbishop with his head on the desk, sobbing. While the work of the Commission has been criticized by both some victims and some of the accused, the reality is that a feared wave of violent retribution for past abuses did not sweep over the country and leave the new administration dealing with bloody chaos. Central to the process was giving those who had suffered harm the opportunity to testify what was done to them and its impact on them, and inviting anyone who had done injury to fully acknowledge their actions and to express remorse. Archbishop Tutu had already received the Nobel Prize in 1984 in response to his work toward a peaceful ending of the apartheid regime. Indeed, it was at an annual gathering of Nobel laureates that he and the Dalai Lama had first met after the latter's award in 1989. Diagnosed with prostate cancer soon after his retirement as Archbishop in 1996, Tutu completed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report in 1998 and spent much of the next several years in the US and England as a visiting professor and sought-after speaker. In 2016, following a visit to Dharamsala, he and the Dalai Lama published a summary of their conversations about spiritual wisdom, titled The Book of Joy, which quickly became an international bestseller. Meanwhile, here in the Western Hemisphere, a somewhat younger activist and author, Black feminist Bell Hooks, also died recently, just a few days before Tutu on December 15th. Hooks was an academic and intellectual rather than religious leader who referred to herself as a Buddhist Christian, citing specifically the Christianity of Martin Luther King and the Buddhist concepts of self-examination, daily practice, and compassion. With the publication of her first book in 1981, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, Hooks began her exploration of what she and others would call intersectionality, the ways in which racism, sexism, and other forms of supremacist culture operated together to reinforce economic oppression and cultural inequity among marginalized people. Hooks advocated for both formal and informal educational methods to help people recognize the ways in which what she referred to as white supremacist capitalist patriarchy distorted their views of themselves and their relationships with others. Among other issues, she was curious about the difficulties that well-intentioned Black and white feminists experienced in trying to form enduring friendships in the context of activism around social issues. In her 2001 book, All About Love, Hooks proposed that a process of self-examination, truth-telling, and forgiveness was essential to bridge the gap between racial communities that has been created and maintained by the interests of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. She writes, "To know compassion fully is to engage in a process of forgiveness and recognition that enables us to release all the baggage we carry that serves as a barrier to healing. Compassion opens the way for individuals to feel empathy for others without judgment. Judging others increases our alienation. When we judge, we are less able to forgive. The absence of forgiveness keeps us mired in shame. Shame breaks and weakens us, keeping us away from the wholeness healing offers. When we practice forgiveness, we let go of shame. Embedded in our shame is always a sense of being unworthy. it separates. Compassion and forgiveness connect us. And she continues, forgiveness not only enables us to overcome estrangement, it intensifies our capacity for affirming one another. Without conscious forgiveness, there can be no genuine reconciliation. Making amends, both to ourselves and to others, is the gift compassion and forgiveness offers us. It is a process of emptying out, wherein we let go all the waste so that there is a clear place within where we can see the other as ourself. The process that Hooks describes has clear resonance with the ways in which Tutu's commission approached the task of reconciling Black and white communities once a democratic majority government had been elected in South Africa. Based on the work of both of these leaders in the tradition of Dr. King, I want to suggest that this practice of reconciliation has 5 significant steps, the first of which is something that Hooks and others have called decolonization. She also refers to it as self-interrogation, because it has to do with fearlessly examining one's own motives and possibly unconscious impulses. Such internal questioning is what enables us to dig up our own acculturated racism, to recognize the privileges and prejudices of white society, or even the implicit assumptions among Black communities that no white person can ever be self-aware or trustworthy. More than just an individual effort, the process of decolonizing also includes the collective recovering of forgotten or repressed history, the re-examination of national and cultural heroes, and the awareness of how legal, economic, and educational structures, among others, have been designed or evolved to support racist outcomes. This internal act of recognition and acknowledgement must then be followed by public accountability. This means telling the uncomfortable truth out loud while repudiating the lies and euphemisms that serve to make supremacy more palatable to the conscience. This can be difficult even for the victims of oppressive practices, who may have been socialized to be ashamed of their own weakness in allowing themselves to be taken advantage of, or for not resisting more heroically. Not only is it grueling for both those who have been harmed and those who have done harm to recount their experiences without evasion, it is also distressing to listen to such accounts. There's a kind of secondary trauma that occurs from bearing witness to violent events, which requires spiritual strength and grounding, so that those who receive such testimony do not become overwhelmed. But it is important to remember that opening up these kinds of truth is rarely as damaging as the original act was. And until the truth is told and responsibility is accepted, both personally and collectively, it is impossible for lasting healing to take place. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission found that being able to tell the story fully, especially to be heard and believed by those in authority, was often the most important step for victims. The third step to bringing about true restoration is the choice on the part of victims to prioritize renewed community over replicated pain. This is the practice of forgiveness that does not mean either forgetting the truth of what has happened or allowing oneself to be damaged again, but rather, as Bell Hooks describes, intentionally releasing our estrangement and shame in the service of compassion. Such forgiveness must come as a free gift or not at all. It can never be compelled, and it happens in its own time. A perpetrator can humbly ask for it, but must not expect that it will be easy or immediate. Indeed, forgiveness that is offered too quickly or without an effort may be rooted in an impulse to try to make everybody comfortable without actually cleansing the wound so that it can truly heal. Genuine forgiveness is a gift that arises in the heart and spirit of the one who was wronged, setting them as well as their oppressor free to build a new world together. Another aspect of forgiveness, which is the fourth step in the process, is that it allows the victim to begin to imagine what genuine reparations might look like. It might mean to restore possession of something that was stolen. It might mean correcting the historical record, either by removing false information or by adding previously ignored knowledge. It might mean creating institutions or structures that benefit those who were harmed. It might include expressions of responsibility and contrition. In some cases, it might take the form of financial compensation, but there are limits to this. The concept that any variety or amount of suffering can be compensated with cash is itself a manifestation of imperial capitalism. Money does not, in fact, resolve everything. This can be clearly seen in the refusal of the Oceti Sakowin tribal peoples to accept the $1.3 billion trust fund held by the federal government that has accumulated over the past 42 years since the Supreme Court ruled that the First Nations treaty rights had been violated in the seizing and distribution to white government interests of the lands, including sacred sites in the Black Hills in 1877. The amount of money is not the point, say tribal leaders. Their holy places were stolen, and they want some control of their holy places back. That is what authentic reparations would look like. While suggestions may prove helpful, it is never up to the perpetrators to decide what can meaningfully mend the breach that they have created. Reparations are a tangible effort to take responsibility and to repair damage in the service of justice and a better future. Finally, bell hooks suggests that it is only when members of diverse communities have accumulated enough trust to be vulnerable to one another that they will have the capacity for true mutuality and thus true community. Black women and white women both struggle when trying to be genuinely vulnerable with each other, she observes, because they do not always realize the extent to which they have internalized white supremacy culture with its functions of competition, betrayal, greed for power, and pleasing those of higher status. Each community views the other with perspectives of inherited suspicion and contempt, which makes it all but impossible for them to form bonds of mutual friendship, affection, and support. Yet these are the bonds that make beloved community real. The principles of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada offer a helpful summary of the process that country has been undertaking to deal with the colonial history of its relations with First Nations and Indigenous peoples. They state, in part, reconciliation is a process of healing relationships that requires public truth-sharing, apology, and commemoration that acknowledge and redress past harms. Reconciliation requires constructive action on addressing the ongoing legacies of colonialism that have had destructive impacts on education, cultures and languages, health, child welfare, administration of justice, and economic opportunities and prosperity. Reconciliation must create a more equitable and inclusive society by closing the gaps in social, health, and economic outcomes that exist between groups. All people share responsibility for establishing and maintaining mutually respectful relationships. The perspectives and understandings of Aboriginal elders and traditional knowledge keepers of the ethics, concepts, and practices of reconciliation are vital to long-term reconciliation. Supporting cultural revitalization and integrating knowledge systems, oral histories, laws, protocols, and connections to the land into the reconciliation process are essential. Reconciliation requires political will, joint leadership, trust building, accountability, and transparency, as well as a substantial investment of resources. Reconciliation requires sustained public education and dialogue, including youth engagement, about the history and legacy of colonial institutions and practices, as well as the historical and contemporary contributions of marginalized people. Such a process is never easy, and it has required both moral and historical imagination to even conceive of. More than half a century ago now, a Black minister stood on marble steps in our nation's capital city and described his dream of beloved community, while many cheered. Today, our Unitarian Universalist Association is engaged in a dialogue about whether that vision stands as an enduring guide in our faith journey. Does building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community belong as an eighth principle in our statement of what we affirm and promote as a corporate body? Perhaps it would help us in this process of decision-making to hold in our minds the image of exiled Tenzin Gyatso playfully stealing Desmond Tutu's cap as they share their interfaith wisdom about living with joy in the midst of a world of suffering. Perhaps it would help us to consider the words of Bell Hooks, fleshing out the dream of her elder brother, Martin. She says, in the segregated South, those Black and white folks who struggled together for racial justice, many of whom grounded their actions not in radical politics, but in religious conviction, were bound by a shared belief in the transformative power of love, understanding that love was the antithesis of the will to dominate and subjugate. We allowed that longing to know love, to love one another, to radicalize us politically. That love was not sentimental. It did not blind us to the reality that racism was deeply systemic, and that only by realizing that love in concrete political actions that might involve sacrifice, even the surrender of one's life, would white supremacy be fundamentally challenged. We knew the sweetness of beloved community. And she further says, in the late 60s, Martin Luther King posed the question, where do we go from here? To live in anti-racist society, we must collectively renew our commitment to a democratic vision of racial justice and equality. Pursuing that vision, we create a culture where beloved community flourishes and is sustained. Those of us who know the joy of being with folks from all walks of life, all races, who are fundamentally anti-racist in their habits of being, need to give public testimony. Like all beloved communities, we affirm our differences. It is this generous spirit of affirmation that gives us the courage to challenge one another, to work through misunderstandings, especially those that have to do with race and racism. in a beloved community, solidarity and trust are grounded in profound commitment and a shared vision. Those of us who are always anti-racist long for a world in which everyone can form a beloved community. Anyone can begin to make such community by truly seeking to live in an anti-racist world. So says Bell Hooks. Revolutionary love calls us to truth and to reconciliation, to heal the harm that white supremacy has done. Beyond that sometimes painful process lies the promise of beloved community, which, if you listen carefully, is now and always calling our name.
Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? It sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh, it sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? I'm so glad trouble don't last always. Oh, I'm so glad trouble don't last always. I'm so glad trouble don't last always. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do?
The words of Dr. King remind us, love is creative and redemptive. Love builds up and unites. Hate tears down and destroys. The way of violence leads to bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. The way of love and nonviolence leads to reconciliation and creation of the beloved community. Thus, love, revolutionary love, which means understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill, even for one's enemies, is always the solution. We release this flame into the world, along with the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fires of commitment. And these we carry also in our minds and hearts until we shall be together again. Thank you for joining us to celebrate the memory and legacy of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. this morning. We now invite you for a few moments of informal conversation and fellowship in our Community Connection Zoom room. You can find the link here on the chat or at our All Souls website homepage. Our Board of Trustees is watching the current Omicron pandemic spike closely and will authorize our return to vaccinated in-person gathering as soon as it seems clear that the local peak has passed. Watch our Facebook page or your email for an announcement. We hope you will join us online next week for a special opportunity to share your joys and sorrows from the past year. You can send in your own video from your phone, submit a written message to be shared, or drop by the church and let Angie help you record your special milestone. Check the website for more information. Several of our regular volunteers with the Hunger Outreach team are out of service due to travel or illness. Consider volunteering, if you are vaccinated, to assemble some sandwiches on Tuesday or Thursday evenings at 5 o'clock to help out our food insecure neighbors. And until next Sunday, please, everybody, wear your mask and get your shots. Take care, stay safe, and be well this week.